Welcome to another episode of Off the Rack. I'm Walt Rackowich, and I'm grateful to have you here as we explore what it means to practice transformative leadership. Now, Steve Graves, my guest, is a strategist, CEO advisor, and author with more than 3 decades of experience working across both large global organizations and, frankly, scrappy startups. He co-owns multiple ventures from next-gen travel to sports media and consumer goods, and has authored 20 books, all woven with the themes of strategy, leadership, and faith. As owner and chairman of Cornerstone Fulcrum Collective, Steve coaches executive leaders and entrepreneurs toward flourishing leadership. He's partnered with remarkable CEOs and rising founders, bringing insight and clarity through both consulting and content creation. Steve also serves on nonprofit boards like Praxis and Q, while also growing his own business ownership portfolio. His blend of coaching and ownership experience gives him a rare vantage point on shaping both culture and enterprises. Steve lives in Northwest Arkansas, a place of cold rivers, bike trails, and perhaps just a few too many traffic jams, as he might say. And he lives with his wife, Karen. And when he isn't fly fishing in those clear waters, you're likely to find him spending time with his 3 grown children and a growing collection of grandchildren. Join us for a conversation with Steve Graves. He's a purpose-driven coach who blends faith, leadership, and bold ownership to help leaders flourish in life and in work. Steve Graves, I am really excited to have you on today. Really excited.
Great. Well, thanks for letting me join you guys today. My pleasure, my honor, and it's going to be fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we get started into some of the business things that we need to talk about, I understand that we've got a little bit in common, especially our love of travel. And I've also heard and read in your books about the fact that you're a fisherman. And you love to fish. So I don't fish nearly as much as you do, but one of my favorite adventures was a trip that I took to the Rogue River in Oregon. Actually, I've done that adventure several times. And we went fishing for steelhead, salmon, and all that good stuff. It was a blast. Tell me about your most memorable trip, or maybe if you'd like to share a bucket list, something that happened to you in fishing.
Yeah, well, great. I have not been to the Oregon River that you've mentioned, but I still have it on my list to go one day. I get to go on 2 or 3 just fantastic trips every year, kind of by engineering. Decided I'm just going to go one with my son, and then one with a couple of buddies, and then usually one with myself. So I've gotten into saltwater fly fishing a lot in the last few years, and so I love chasing bonefish. That's a lot of fun for me. But I live in Arkansas, where there's a tremendous fishery called the White River that has just humongous brown trout in it. And so I fish probably every month for big browns. Memorable trip. Actually, my son and I went down just this year back in May, and we did a trip down to Mexico, kind of chasing some tarpon and some permit and some bonefish at the same time, and had a wonderful grand slam. It was fantastic. And that's probably one of the most memorable trips I've had in a while for sure. So thanks for asking. And yes, I do love to fish. I do.
By the way, I didn't even bring this up, but I did go on a fishing trip in Cabo where I actually caught 120-pound tuna.
Oh my! That's a different level, my friend. Well, wait, get the trophy and go. That's fantastic.
It took a couple other guys to help me pull it in, though. I will say that.
It's a big fish.
That's a big fish. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, Steve, let's get into coaching a little bit. First of all, I want you to know I've worked with executive coaches during my whole career, and so I know how beneficial they can be to leaders. And matter of fact, I write about how beneficial coaches have been to me in my book. And I'm curious about how you got into this type of work, and how how you define your approach to coaching high-level leaders.
Yeah, thanks for asking. You know, Walt, I kind of backed into it, to be very fair and honest. Decades ago, one of my earliest business partners, and I've had tons and tons of partners since then, still the very best business partner I've ever had, hands down, the best one. He and I started a company together, and it took about a year or two for me and him to realize that that we defined a difference between consulting and coaching. And this is just our definition. We're not trying to push it on top of anyone's matrix or fabric at all. But for us, consulting was working with the company as your primary customer and then adding a little bit of value to a few individuals along the way. Coaching was working with an individual and then adding some value to the company along the way through that leader or that individual. And my original business partner migrated toward consulting and I migrated toward coaching. And so, I've just been coaching CEOs and business owners and founders for the last, 2.5 decades. My model is a little bit different. I'm not an industry specialist. I assume that you as a CEO really understand your industry enough for us to work on the things that need to be worked on. But if you've worked with the top 3 of the top 5 poultry companies of the world, you learn a little bit about chickens or eggs or something. So it's not like that I don't have any industry depth to me, but I am not an industry specialist. What I am is I'm a CEO specialist around a couple of areas. And one of the big premises that we build is we really focus on trying to make sure that the person's formation is growing at the same rate as their vocation or their work opportunities. And so if you take a infinity circle and bring it down on its horizontal plane, just think about, these two circles being blended together. Well, a lot of times what happens, just one reason or the other, a lot of times a leader is really not growing who they are as a person at the same rate as their vocational trajectory or their path forward. And so we have a model that we've designed, and I've created about 110 or 111 frameworks and models through the years that we use to drive our coaching practice. And we're not a practice that's like whatever you need, we do. We can, we're everything for everybody. That's not it. We're a highly specialized, pretty top tier, pretty selective kind of a model and a firm. And and it's been a great thing that fits who I am. Love the model, and it's been a great way for me to be able to journey alongside a CEO for a season, a stretch. I'm not the guy that embeds myself in your P&L and you're forever saying, now, what does that guy do again around here? That is not us. We work off of a dashboard. We drive things forward. We make progress, get it done. And then we shake hands and say, man, be a great friend for life. And we're out and gone. So that's kind of our model. If that makes any sense, I don't know if that's helpful, but there are so many different coaching models and I, love all kind of people doing all kind of models, but that's kind of our model.
So I'm kind of curious. You probably have coached executives, global executives, entrepreneurs. Difference between those groups from one person to another?
Yeah, great question. The answer is there's a whole bunch of difference. There's difference in wiring and personality and all that. But I think the biggest distinction would be maybe what we could lock in and call this a difference in age, a difference in miles, and a difference in address. The age difference is often different. You could still have an entrepreneur who's leading a very huge global public company, but their wiring is very entrepreneurial. They're always driving innovation, whether it's incremental or moonshot innovation. They're reinventing themselves. They're practicing the founders. They're doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But the age is a big difference because age sometimes, not all, and certainly not by itself, but age can distinguish how you're thinking about the task of leadership, the people that are working with you, your team, the market, the opportunity, the risk, a bunch of stuff like that. So age is a variable. Miles is a variable. And what I mean by miles is just miles on the truck, just miles on you. If this is your first go through with taking a company public, then that's fine. If this is your fourth company to go public, then it's not that you're an expert, but this is not your first time through. You're not scrambling in a compressed way trying to get your learning curve going faster. The miles will help you with that. And then the last is the address. If you're the CEO or if you're the leader of Walmart, that's one thing. And we were talking about a mutual friend of ours that you've had on your show. Mike Duke's been a longtime friend. Well, being the CEO of Walmart, and Doug is a wonderful friend too. But I mean, being the CEO of Walmart is one address. It's another address if you're the CEO or the founder of a fantastic mechanical company that has 400 employees, and it's fantastic. But that's a different address. Mm-hmm. That's a different location of work. A lot of the similarities, but a lot of differences. And so, for me, I don't really start with wiring and personality type. That does come into play, but for me, it's a little bit more about your age, maybe your miles, maybe, and then your address, like what it is the assignment is for you right now. I remember, while I was on a panel one time in the Bay Area of California years ago. And I actually showed up. I got there barely. The thing had already started. My plane got delayed and all this stuff. And so we finally landed. I jumped in a quick trip to get over there, walked in, and they were working on the question of what makes the perfect CEO. And I'm less about that person looks like this and can do these things. Mine is more about that person's age, miles, and their wiring, but it's more about they're rightly fit for the company's season they're in and the season they're going through, the one they're headed. You find that person still might not work, but what that does is that takes off all of the historical competence. Like, I know you did it over there, but can you do it over here? You took that team to the national championship, but we just hired you and paid you a boatload of money. Can you take this one? Well, you don't know, because this one might be in a whole different cycle or season time. So those are some of the differences in my mind of being a large or a different CEO here versus a CEO or an executive there.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a heck of a lot of sense. But are there some universal truths about leadership that apply to both ends? The entrepreneur, the miles, all that stuff. There's some universal truths that you found.
Yeah, great question. I actually feel like I should be asking you, because you wrote the book on leadership for sure. So I definitely would love for you to weigh in. But yes, there are some definite things. There's a cultural fit for me that. We had to let one of our CEOs go in the holding company that I'm the executive chairman of a couple of years ago. And I remember one of the reasons is we thought on paper this was going to be a great fit, but it just wasn't. It just wasn't. And a lot of times you don't know fit until after the fact. Now, I'm not saying you never know, and maybe you're right 70% of the time, 80% of the time. But there are occasions that you don't know fit until someone has moved into the address, and they're doing the work. And then you realize and say, oh my, this person it's just not going to work, And so fit is very important. And when I say fit, I mean fit the culture, fit the investors, fit the owners, fit the family, fit the market, fit the industry. There's a lot of people that jump industries, and they were incredible in this industry. Very science-based, very metric-driven, all of that. But then they jump to a more creative, conceptual industry, and they just can't make it. But you don't know that until they get there, So fit is a very important one. Someone's what I would call philosophical or theological view of leadership, that one is really important. And and you and I both. You have been a CEO, and you also have worked with a zillion CEOs and leaders through the years. But you and I both know, I know CEOs that are really top-down driven. They're the alpha dog or the alpha female dog, or they are very top-down driven. I know some people that are very aggressive, outward. I know people that are very introverted, they're quiet, they're collaborative. And so it's less about personality, but it's about the philosophical, theological, ideological view of leadership. So, for example, are people here just to make me successful? Is everyone here simply a transactional robot, even though they're humans and all that? But is their existence really here for me to be successful on my stage, or do I have I figured out my role, in the drama, in the play, and I'm comfortable with it, but like it's not really about me. I
Right.
do play a role, and so that's what I mean by that one. So those are two things that would be similar, but I'd love to hear you. I mean, I hate to put you on the spot on your own podcast, but like you, you play it back. I mean, like, what are some similarities you've seen?
No, I used to always say that, and you're right, sometimes it's a personality thing, but I used to always say, people used to ask me, what do you look for in an interview? And I actually look for three things, and I called them my three H's, but I look for humility. Your comment that it's not about me. I look for honesty, and I look for humanness. And humanness means putting others first. I don't think leaders last long term if they put themselves first, and certainly not in the corporate environment today. And so everybody has a little bit of different take on it, but those were the qualities of leaders that I looked for, and I tried to exemplify. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to not every once in a while get caught up in your own success, and brutal honesty is sometimes very difficult, especially when you're managing people. But I found that those are three characteristics of some of the best leaders that I've ever seen.
Love it. And to your original question, those would apply regardless of someone's age, someone's
Yeah,
address, like whether you're working on that side of the street in a massive global company, complicated, or
yeah.
you're working on this side of the street, in a chain of restaurants and whatever. I mean, like, I completely agree that that would be universally applicable
Yeah.
to a leader, across the board.
So one of your books goes into detail about the 5 tasks that every senior leader needs to do. Um, I guess I would ask you, was that in response to something your clients were dealing with, or, and which of those tasks do leaders struggle with the most?
Yeah, great question. The answer is emphatically yes. Everything that I've written and all of the stuff that I've created generally is from the street back. I'm not a classroom out guy. And it's not because, I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not the dumbest either. And so I like researching. I love reading, but I'm not an academic kind of moving conceptual theory out, trying to figure out how it might be applied. I'm a guy that's living out. I'm interfacing with CEOs, maybe not every day anymore, but a lot every week, and I'm real time testing things that I'm trying over and over and over. And so the 5 tasks actually came kind of in reverse engineering from the streets after I'd worked with CEOs for a few years. And I finally sat down and said, wow, I'm saying the same thing over and over. I might as well throw that into a book. The 5 tasks are this. Now, there's a whole world of leadership about building who you are, the being part of a leader. And that's not what I'm addressing in this one. In this one, I'm addressing what it is your seat requires you to do. If you're sitting in the CEO seat, regardless of your Enneagram type, doesn't matter. The seat requires you to do at least these 5 things. Now, in a big public company, there's a few things layered on. I get that, but I'm reducing it to the bare minimum, the minimum list of things. It's to set direction. We're going there, not there, and for these reasons. Okay, set speed. You don't set the speed of the market. No company sets the speed of the market. They might set it for just a minute with an innovation or a product or something, but the market sets its own speed. I mentioned Walmart. I live in Northwest Arkansas. Walmart's up the street. Love that company. Love the people there. But I mean, they're not setting the speed of e-commerce. Amazon's not setting the speed of e-commerce. Your company is setting the speed that you're going to relate to the speed of the market. And so the leader's job is to set direction, set speed, set risk. I'm going to risk all of my farm. I'm going to risk half of my farm. I'm going to risk your farm. I've talked you in a way to putting your farm up for my idea. But you gotta set risk, okay? Set resources. And even though resources are a plethora of things, I usually reduce it to three kind of things in the toolbox. It's people, money, and structure. If you set those things up correctly, if you get those three, that's kind of your hammer, your screwdriver, and your pliers, or whatever way you want to call it, the big three in the toolbox. So it's set direction, speed, risk, resources, and culture. And culture, we all know a lot about culture there, but it's your job to set it. The question of which one is the easiest and hardest, I think, depends on a number of variables. It depends on who I am and how I'm wired. It depends on what season and cycle the market is asking, or the investors or the opportunities is asking for my company to excel through and in. That's another one. And then it might be, depending on what it is I'm really trying to get done, I might have to elevate up or down. So in my practice, all through the years, we would take every quarter, we would set a scorecard for these five. For every CEO, you're going to set the scorecard, and then we would we'd benchmark and trend pattern them over the course of the year. And in one quarter, you might be worried about speed, and that might be the one that you really need to say, hey, I need us to run faster in this industry of becoming, an integrated this or whatever, whatever. And so it for me, and I'm not trying to weasel out of the question, but it's totally dependent on some variables that are driving the organization in the market at the time of your leadership. Yep. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yep. Absolutely.
Again, your experience, would that rings true with the way you would think about a CEO setting those five things?
It does. I actually find that the last one, setting culture, is probably the most difficult. Not for me, but I think for a lot of leaders me too. I mean, it's not easy. You can get the direction, you can get the speed, and you get the risk, and maybe the resources are a little more difficult, but setting the culture is really, and so that everybody is working, in the same direction, is easier said than done. I think.
I completely agree. And we know, research proves and shows that if you can ever get the culture into kind of what its potential aspirational idea is, the culture can become an incredible asset. I mean, it's like having it's like having a line of credit with no ceiling on it or something. It has incredible upsides for a CEO to be able to wield and shift and move and lead, and then sustaining and reanimating that culture, year over year, 3 years over 3 years, especially in fast moving organizations. That becomes almost like a Groundhog Day, where you say to yourself, we just did this, but you got to say, but look at all that, 30% of our hires are new, or whatever it is, or we just opened up a new division on the West Coast or whatever. And so having to reanimate that and refocus yet on that same thing over and again, that can become a fatiguing thing for leaders. Because, I have seen leaders get up for the first run, it's the first few miles of the culture marathon, but then it's like that mile 19 way out there, year 7, still saying culture is what it is and what it should be. And when you begin to move CEOs, cycle in and out or whatever, it's a never ending, to your point, it's a never ending task of the leader to set them. And just so you know, in the book, when I say set, I mean set like a volleyball in a volleyball tournament, or set like a fence post at a gate. It's you can set it top down, bottom up, in the middle, and go both ways, but it has to be set. And the misnomer is, if you don't set it, it just won't happen. That's not true. If you're in my company and I'm the CEO, and you're in my company and I don't set it, I promise you, you will. Now you might be because that's who you are. You're not some guy now. We might have trouble, but I mean, and so it's a CEO's job to make sure it's in place, that it's being done, and so, I completely agree. Culture is often the hardest for people to maintain, um, uh, the rebuilding and the animating of it.
Or set in the first place, because sometimes it sets itself.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, no,
If you're
great,
not
great
proactive.
question, great
Yeah.
point, great
Yeah.
insight. Completely agree.
So I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit, Steve. In recent years, you've not only coached execs, but you've gotten involved as a co-owner in some ventures. I think grocery delivery, outdoor adventure, sports media, all these companies. First of all, how does being an entrepreneur across all these industries shape your coaching approach? Are you coaching yourself?
Probably, and I probably let my clients coach me when I'm having my other hat.
Right.
I mean, I do have the fortunate privilege of I'm the executive chairman of a holding company, primarily CPG. It's primarily consumer product goods, and we live in Northwest Arkansas in Walmart, so it's an easy place to be for that. But probably about 12 to 15 years ago, Walt, I backed into owning some companies and being the primary partner, either the financial partner or the strategic partner or the scale partner, or whichever term happened to fit at the time with the person. And then was able to get in and get out of some things, which then allowed me to continue thinking about, was that something I really liked? And one of the things I always wanted to do is I wanted to make sure I was not just a theorist with ideas, even though, and this is not a sideways slap at counselors or other coaches or consultants at all. Got huge. I mean, I had a heart attack 8 years ago, one stent in. To my knowledge, my heart surgeon, who's a great friend of mine, has never had a heart surgery. So this is not one of those that until you've been in the CEO seat or until you've owned the company out, you don't really know anything. It's not that. But that said, in the world of business enterprise, owning companies has allowed me to carry the weight, of the payroll and the financing. It's allowed me to be involved in the hard questions, not just as as somebody riding in the right seat of the cockpit, but being in the left seat where the pilot sits, and you have to answer: are we not flying through this thing or whatever? And so it's been really, really helpful for me in growing me as a person. And one more thing on that, it's really refined my ability to be a partner. And I'm a partner guy. There's some people by wiring, they're sole proprietors. Some people are corporate by their wiring. I'm a partner guy by my wiring. And so I've had just lots and lots of partners, and it's been a great place for me to, kind of refine my own self-growth and development as a person. So
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic that you're also seeing the other side of things, and I think it probably helps you round out the way that you think, especially when you've had to go through it yourself.
Yeah, I think it does. To be, Walt, to be really, really frank, I probably can slide into my coaching hat pretty easy sometimes, but it holds the tension. It holds me in tension in places that if I really want to grow and continue developing as a person, I have a chance right there. I get a chance right there, and so, thanks for the question. I don't, a lot of people, I don't get that question that all. I am as a person. It's been a ton of fun, and we haven't won on all of them. I mean, we've lost, till you've written off a few companies, it's kind of like, wow, it's easy to recommend somebody just shut it down and take a loss and get to the next one. But like when you have to hit exit on a few of those that you are either maybe the majority on, and something, it's like, okay, here we go. Is that really going to happen?
Oh, I know. Hey, let's look. There's nothing more significant than experiencing it yourself, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
So again, switch gears a little bit. One of your books is called Flourishing. And
Oh yeah.
and in that book, you explore thriving both personally and professionally, which I think is a huge challenge for leaders these days. At least sometimes for me, it's like I'm either all in or I'm not in at all, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind
Yeah.
of and
Yeah.
and finding the times when you're all in and not in at all, and be able to do both is not easy. But I'm just kind of curious, what does flourishing look like for you?
Yeah.
And how do you know when you've arrived there?
Yeah, well, I think what I try to do in the book, and what I really believe, is, and remember my theory of writing, you know, uh, I'm not some self-prescribed expert at something. I'm just a guy who took enough time to slow down and capture my thinking in a book, and then I'm going to go on down. But the thinking's been it's been curated from the street, from other really wise, really smart people. And I just began to watch people and look at people that I really admired, that they were flourishing both in their work life and in their personal life to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, and began asking myself, what is it that they're doing? And then distill it all down. And so the book outlines some of the things I saw them doing. The really funny part of that whole book is the thesis of that book I completely left out. And so in the next printing I'll make it back in. But the thesis of flourishing is right thinking plus wise living over time. So that's, if you're going to have a formula of what it looks like to flourish, it's right living bundled with right thinking, right thinking bundled with wise living. That means that means being actionable with your right thinking, and then letting that cook over time, letting that cook. And so let me give you an example. In the Flourishing book, I built out a model and a framework that I've been using for 30 years. I try to apply it to myself. I don't always do a great job, but it's the model called chasing and living out a composite scorecard of life. The composite scorecard of life simply means there's a bunch of things that are important to you all at the same time. I mean, anybody can live this is only the only thing I live for and nothing else matters. I'm going to run marathons and I don't care about anything. Don't care
Mm-hmm.
about my family. Don't care about my money. Don't care about my boss. I don't care. I mean, anybody can do that. The question is can I run a marathon? Can I still be a good family man? Oh, by the way, I just had three small kids that my wife would love for me to be involved in. It's not me. I'm a granddad, but as an example, and oh, by the way, I got three partners that really expect me to grow the company forward that they just put money into. I mean, can I do all those things at one time in parallel fashion, giving energy and fuel to the one at the moment that really needs it? So chasing a composite scorecard, that is what right thinking looks like for success. If success is a one-dimensional, mountain out there, then that's wrong thinking. So if I have right thinking, and then I'm somehow converting that into wise living, and I'm running that play over time, there's a pretty good chance that I will find myself, whenever I sit down and look in the mirror, I'm not going to be completely unhappy. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have tragedy. It doesn't mean everything was up and to the right. It doesn't mean that, my bank account just kept going up and up and up and up. It doesn't mean that there's not blood on the table with some relationships or something. But I will not be sitting there with massive regret, and all of that, because I will have lived a life of flourishing if I get those things lined up. So the question of is, am I living it? And my answer is I'm trying to, and some weeks, months, years are probably better than others with benchmarking, but I'm trying to. Like I got a bunch of stuff going on as a businessman. I've got 6 grandkids that are really little. I love to fish. I got a bunch of business partners. And so, I got a wife that we still love to travel. And so the question is, can I chase that as a portfolio composite mentality?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't do it just one at a time because they're all live. They're all real at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's an example.
I love that. Somebody recently told me life is like an investment portfolio. And there's a plethora of things that you have to do. And the question is, in any one day, which are you going to overweight and underweight?
That's
And
it.
you
Yeah.
must think of it that way.
Yeah.
But he who does invest in a portfolio, diversified portfolio, ultimately wins down the road.
Yep.
And so it's just a question of how do you allocate your time in any
Absolutely.
one day. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of that. So Steve, you've spent much of your life exploring the connection between theology and leadership. And some of your books, including The Gospel Goes to Work and your most recent book, Radical Stewardship,
Ah,
um, look, they dive pretty deeply into the spiritual dimensions of leadership, and that's near and dear to my heart. I'll be honest with you. But what are some of the ways that you encourage leaders to integrate faith authentically into their daily business practices? Do you what if someone just doesn't simply want to believe
yeah. Yeah.
or have faith? How do you deal with those things?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and thanks for the fair question and setting it up in a fair way. I mean, I don't lead with my faith. I'm not a guy I'm not the Christian CEO, coach. I mean, there are out there organizations that's what they do, and that's fantastic. So I
Yeah,
don't lead with that, but my faith shapes and informs every single thing that I do. I try to. I hope it does. Um, and so it starts off just making sure that someone really does understand that their faith and their work are not two separate worlds, that they really do live in the same sector, the same quadrant. Or they're supposed to. We're supposed to be fully integrated people. Now, the good news about founders, owners, CEOs is the higher you get in the organization, the more integrated and baked in life can be if somebody's trying to do that. If they're trying to segment and become fractional and compartmentalized, you can do that. You can pull that off at any level. So I try to make sure somebody realizes that the faith element and the spiritual element is part of who we are as humans and people, and to discount that is kind of it's like discounting your health or your relationships or your family or something.
mm-hmm.
Now that said, what happens after that is depending on the person and depending on what the opportunity and the assignment is in my coaching task with them. With some people, I'll bleed my faith language and stuff a lot more easily and clearly with them. But others, I'll hold it, but it's still at work. It's still working itself through. And I remember I had years and years ago, I had this CEO of a public company, a technology company, and he was this incredibly educated dude. I mean, I'm not going to list it in case, he ever would hear this, but like you give me a credential. If you think an MBA from Harvard or Stanford is important, check. If you think a doctorate in business from an international school in Europe, check. I mean, just the dude had a brain like 10 times bigger than mine. It was like, he had everything, and he was not a Christian. But one year during the holidays, I remember we were sitting in his office, and I would fly to this certain city. We'd spend a long 2.5, 3 hour lunch once a month together. And I remember he wheeled his chair around, and I had his back. He had his back to me like this. And I was like, okay, all right, what's happening here? And he was looking out this big glass window, and he said, "Hey, man, can I ask you a personal question?" And I said, "Well, sure. I mean, like, that's what we are doing here. Like, yeah." And he said, "I don't know how to ask you." And I said, "Come on, man. We've been working together for a couple of years. Just grab me and jump in. No, we're not going to drown. Jump in." So dude starts tearing up a little bit, which I'd never seen him. Never ever had that level of that kind of emotion. He had emotion, but and he said, "Hey, man," he said, I got a few kids, and specifically, I've got two boys, and one of them loves me and one of them hates me." And he said, I just don't even know what to do with the one that hates me, And so we dug deep into that. Well, here's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay. It was impossible for my faith not to show up in that. Mm. Impossible, because my faith was helping me shape how I think about parenting and children and faith and hope and relationships and being vulnerable and all of that stuff. So my faith is central to what I do and who I am, but it doesn't come out in the same, it's not the same menu item regardless of who you are and what it is we're doing.
Mm.
But, and I don't, and I'm still growing tremendously and developing in my own faith journey. I am not the guy I was 20 years ago or even 10 years ago in my own faith journey. I'm still learning a lot and applying and trying to figure out, does the Bible have anything to say about discrete elements that drive the modern markets that I work in? Pick a topic and ask. And I'm still trying to figure that out some. So don't know if that helps any or answers your question, but that's how I think about it.
No, it does. When I was running the company, I one time stood up in front of I used to say this quite a bit, but I remember the first time I said it, I used to say, guys, we're going through a really difficult time right now. And I said, adversity leads to perseverance, and perseverance builds character. And somebody came up to me afterward and he said, where'd you get that from? I said, oh, it's in Romans in the Bible.
I'm just quoting. I'm just quoting.
I'm just quoting. I sure didn't come up with it, but it really is a great idea.
Eight is pretty solid. It's pretty solid truth.
It's pretty solid truth. So, all right. So, Steve, you're now in what I think you refer to as season 6.0 of your life. I love that. God only knows what 1 through 5 is, but anyway, what do you mean by that? And what's next for you in this season?
Yeah, I don't know what's next exactly, but what I did is, I had a reason that I needed to sit down and I needed to actually bring language to the seasons of my career and my work and my life and stuff like that. And so, I'll turn 70 this December. And I'm in the 6.0 season and I've been in it for, probably 4 or 5 years now. But the 6.0 season for me is the season that, and I put words against each season, which was helpful for me. I'm just kind of a content farmer. I'm always doodling and creating stuff, and so I put some words against the 6.0 season, and the words that I'm using that frame this season are words like harvest, words like transfer, words like impact, words like legacy, words like enjoyment and satisfaction, which is it's a really kind of a squirrely word, but it sits right in the middle. To use your point that you just made, it sits right in the middle of Ecclesiastes and says satisfaction is actually a gift from the Lord. And so, instead of me always having this, I gotta push and climb another mountain, I'm trying to enjoy more satisfaction to life. And so, now if you ask my wife, she'd say, I don't know how good you're doing it, laying in the plane on a few things, but I'm in the harvest season. I mean, I'm harvesting. I'm not starting a bunch of brand new things.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm not doing anything new, but I'm not, and I'm transferring. We added a managing partner to our coaching firm. My son, after a little stint in some business and entrepreneur stuff, joined us, and two or three other people. And I would have never done that by myself, but I'm transferring a lot of stuff to them. So, that's the season, that's the 6.0 season that I'm in. And it's overlaid with more and more time for, my wife, my family, my grandkids. We spend a lot of time with our grandbabies, and then when I can, I try to go fishing.
I understand. The book that I wrote is called Transfluence, being transformationally influential in the lives of other people, and I think that's the season that I'm in as well, which is to say that I want to be transformatively influential, I should say, in the lives of other people around me. I didn't feel that way when I was in my 30s and 40s, but I certainly feel that way now. So I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah, I know you could use all those terms. I know you could talk on all those terms because I know they're relevant to who you are and where your own season is. But like to your point, just take your one word of transformative leadership. I'm not saying that nobody in their 30s thinks about it, and that would be unfair and certainly totally blind and arrogant on my part, because that's just not true. But you don't think about it. Think about the age, miles, and address thing again.
Mhm.
You don't think about transformative leadership then like you think about it now. In my season, or yours. And so I love that language and that clarity for this season of life.
So I have one more question for you, and I ask everybody of this before we wrap up. The question is, what single purpose are you most passionate about pursuing? And perhaps you've answered that. I don't know, but I am curious.
Yeah,
What purpose are you kind of passionate about living today about?
Yeah, well, that's again a really good question, a hard question for a guy like me. Really, really hard, because I am a generalist. I do live life as a portfolio leader, to your point earlier, and I just got a lot of things going on. But probably, I think the book I just wrote on stewardship, and then I'm writing a book right now on aging with joy, grace, and purpose, and just about finished with it. And I think the big thing for me is the 6.0 season. I'm really trying to, I'm trying to do what it is I said I really wanted to try to do. Not just put it on the wall somewhere, but then live a life that's completely over here, completely different. Like, I'm really trying to transfer, and I'm trying to really harvest, and I'm trying to live a satisfied, fulfilled life. With what's in front of me and what I have. And so if you just push me hard and I had to answer, I'd say I'm really trying to lock in and live out the stuff that I've identified in the 6.0 season for my life today. That's kind of where I am.
That's beautiful. Well, Steve, I can just tell you that I'm really thankful that you joined me today on this episode of Off the Rack. Really grateful to you. And again, I'd just like to tell you how much I enjoy talking to you, and I love where your heart is, and just thanks. What can I say?
Yeah,
Great having you on.
Thanks for letting me be here. And I enjoyed it actually equally as much. I always love meeting people that I can learn some stuff from. And, your spirit and heart kind of reflects. I know what it looks like to have worked with you and for you, as an employee. So thanks for the CEO demonstration that you've been making all your life. So yeah. And appreciate you letting me be with you.
Great to have you on, Steve. And I will remember direction, set speed, set risk, set resources, and set culture. Probably the most difficult thing for most of us.
There you go, man. Yeah. Thanks for letting me join you.
You bet. And I'd like to thank everybody also who tuned in today. You can always find more insights from our guests in the Off the Rack Plus newsletter. Follow Off the Rack on your podcast, your favorite platform. Leave a review, share this episode with somebody who needs it. And until next time, I encourage all of you to be human with one another, most importantly, and find a way to have a positive influence on somebody around you each and every day. Thank you, everybody.